This could be an idea for the design of a Christmas card. It's a sunny street scene in Colchester, UK. So this is a recording of a recent live demo I did for my Patreon members. What is Patreon? Well, think of Patreon like an online club, and every month I set my members a painting project. And depending on what level of membership, you get different tiers or different levels of membership on Patreon, you get to receive an individual critique from me on your painting. So this is an edited recording of the live demo I recently gave, a snowy street scene in Colchester. Just a little warning, as we go through, you will hear some bangs, low bangs. This was recorded on Firework Night in the UK. So November the 5th is an annual celebration of Guy Fawkes Night, and my neighbours were quite enthusiastic in setting off quite loud fireworks as I was going through. Memo to myself, never do a live recording or live stream on November the 5th again. So apologies if you do hear some loud bangs. I'm not in a war zone, thankfully. It's just some fireworks going off there in the background. The theme of this demo is a snowy street scene, and it might be something like this that would be suitable for you for a Christmas card if it's that time of year and you're thinking about creating your own Christmas cards. Then maybe this might be a possible candidate for you. So we're looking at the main street in Colchester, a church on the left, church tower, sun over on the left hand side, got some nice shadows coming across the scene, a few vehicles there for an indication of some scale and size and an extra bit of interest. There's a pub here on the right hand side, but lovely shadows coming across. The snow is not too thick, it's a kind of thin dust level, just a really dusting of snow across the town here. But we'll certainly try and get that feeling of snow on the rooftops and across the ground. If I can describe the materials to you that I'm using. So Saunders Waterford cold pressed paper, 15 inches by 11 inches. The paints that I'm using are from Jackman's Art Materials. There's neutral tint, burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, spring green, viridian green, cobalt green, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, cadmium red, light red, cadmium orange, and cadmium yellow down there. A few mixing wells, water's over to the right. I will be using a few brushes I go through. I will describe those brushes as I use them, what the brush type is, and the manufacturer as well. Okay, well let's get started then on the scene. Colchester then, and what I sometimes do is a little thumbnail sketch of the scene. And earlier on I divided a piece of paper into four with the intention of doing four different alternatives of the scene, but I actually pretty much like that first one there, so I didn't really bother doing any more. And then after that I then did a larger one here, trying to plan out mainly the composition and the lights and the darks. So we've got the main tower there, light hitting this left hand side. There's a bit of light hitting the rooftops as we go through the middle of the scene, light hitting the pub on the right hand side, and then coming to the middle ground. I've introduced a couple of vehicles. In the photograph there was a van and a bus. That doesn't really do it for me. I'm going to remove those and put in a couple of cars and imagine a little bit of light hitting the windscreen as well. So there's going to be some light against a darker background. Coming closer to me, there's all sorts of street furniture here, lampposts, bollards, signs. There's this squarish sign here, which is obscuring the tower. I'm going to remove that. I'm going to remove the tree here as well that's hiding the tower. I'm not going to bother doing these street lights also. It doesn't really do much for me, or that sign pointing in the wrong direction. I will include these bollards. That's quite a nice feature, that these bollards leading us into the scene. And these pillars here as well. I'll move those slightly to the right and then have a couple of figures on that right-hand side. So I think it's a bit of a balance here between what's going on the left-hand side and what's going on the right-hand side. I will include that no entry sign as well. You can just about see it there. It's in the shade. I've moved it a little bit over to the left, but I will have a little bit of a nod to some of the street signs here. Right. Okay. So there we have it. My plan of the proceedings. And I'll make a start with the initial drawing. And where to start? Well, I think I might start with the rooftop of the ridge of the roof of the church on the left-hand side. Get that in. And get the angle right as well. And then we've got the two sides of the tower. Church roof comes down a little bit like that. There's a little bit of perspective in this scene, so you need to be careful with these lines and the angles of these lines. So a strong vertical there of the corner of the tower, and then the other side of the tower, and this side is narrower than that side. That point there needs to be almost in the midpoint of that left-hand side. Now, as this tower on the right-hand side, as it comes down, it does widen. There's some, you can't see it because it's being hidden by this sign here, but it does actually sort of come out a little bit in a few steps, a few stages. Of course, the top of the tower has some, like a castle-like edge to it. Something like that. Going beyond the tower into the middle, we've got a house with two ends to it. Now, the bottom of that roof is almost horizontal. Some chimneys. And then we come over to the pub. Which just angles slightly up there. And then street level, get in the street level, which is just going a little bit uphill. So the horizon line is round about there. There's the bottom of the buildings, the street level. Now a car. There's the front windscreen. Bottom of the car. That's the main one. So light there, dark behind, and then a smaller car or a more distant car behind it. Just back a little bit, just slightly smaller. Try and keep them simple. Like that. A couple of cars. Again, thinking about the perspective, imagining they're in a line. Now, the road here splits into two. There's a little bit of a slither of snow here on a sort of island. That's the far side of the road next to the church. So road here, road here. And then shadows coming across the scene. Bottom of the pub. And there's some low walls in front of the pub. Well, it looks like low walls anyway. Above the pub, above the ground floor, there's some signage and some windows. There we go. Right. Figures. Back to the plan. Figures here. When starting a figure, I'll start from the head working downwards, which to me is the natural way of doing it, but trying to find a reference point. So, for example, the tops of those cars may be their shoulders, their heads would be just above the tops of the cars. So that puts them around about there, maybe. And just very quickly drawing that figure. At this stage, I'm not sure whether they're coming towards us or going away. Maybe they're coming towards us. So I'll just pencil in some cross hatching there to indicate a face, and then another person around about there, maybe. Slightly different pose of this one. Remember arms, and again, a little bit of cross hatching for the face. The pillar is going to be around about, so these pillars here, and they've got some lovely lights on top of them. Well, that one looks like it's got a bit of a statue or something, but this one here, let's just put one of those in for context. And these vertical objects will serve to connect the foreground with the background. Again, those figures, they're connecting this foreground. This is shadow here. Connect the foreground with the background. Just in front of the pub, there's a little bit of a soft shadow, not as dark as the foreground shadow. Above the pub, there are some buildings that we can just see going into the distance. Another chimney here. So I can see these square chimneys all over the place. Just adding a little bit of interest to those rooftops. Next, the no entry sign, and just a few little bits of the street furniture and the bollards, and then we'll just check the drawing, and then we're pretty much done. The no entry sign, let's put that around about there. So a circle, white line across, 2 red halves, and the post for it going down, something like that. Just a few geometric objects to give the impression of some street furniture there. There's the tree on the left-hand side. I'm not bothering doing that tree there, okay? And finally, some bollards going up just to the right of the center line. A few bollards there, just again leading us into the scene. So perspective again, if they're on that sort of line, thinking about the height of them as well, and some shadows going off to the right. Just below the church, or sorry, this side of the church, there's a wall. There's a few lines, top of the wall, railing, architectural details. Top of the church tower, there's a line there, a line there. There's a sort of squarish window there. Another one on that side. That makes it look a little bit more like a church. And the top of the tower, there's a spike or some lightning conductor or something up the top there. All right, I think I'm pretty much done on my drawing. I'll just put in just a few outlines of the windows for the pub. And then on ground level, slightly larger windows, doorways, like that. Yeah, so there we are. That's the initial drawing done. Trying to make sure I've got the placement of the objects right, knowing where the lights are going to be. Well, the lightest areas maybe there. That could be quite light. Light of the windscreen of the car, fairly light here, quite light on the pub and the snow as well. So this snow is quite a cool color. The pub is more of a warmish color, like a sort of very weak yellow ochre, a little bit of yellow ochre, but very, very light in value. The darker areas are going to be in that sort of area there, which will contrast quite nicely with the windscreen of the car, and also going down further down the street where it goes behind the pub, that could be quite dark as well. My plan here is to get in the sky, first of all, light here, darker there, and then some of the base color for the church buildings and the pub, and just a little bit of coloring to the snow. The snow is not pure white. It's just slightly, it has a slightly darker value to it, which is going to, I can't leave the paper white. I'm just going to put in a very, very light coloring, a very weak wash of a coolish color, just to give it a bit of texture, and also maybe leave tiny bits of the paper unpainted, which could be some of the footsteps that we can see in the photo. First brush I'm going to use to lay down this wash is a mop brush with a good point to it. This is a squirrel mop brush from Jackson's, but there's loads of different brushes of this sort of type, but a nice soft brush and holds a lot of paint. So I'll mix up a very weak wash of cerulean blue. But get stronger as I go over to the right-hand side. If you haven't got cerulean blue, cobalt blue will do. A little hair has come out the brush there. So go stronger as we go over. Doesn't matter if I go over the tower on that right-hand side, because that's going to be darker. And also, as I come down to the rooftops, that will be a little bit lighter as well. So I've just picked up a bit of clear water. Down to the rooftops. And it doesn't matter if you don't go over the rooftops, because that could be, of course, being a snowy scene, that could be a little light covering of snow. There we are. Now, down to the buildings, pick up a little bit of light red. This rooftop will be blue. This is just a bit of covering for the buildings. Carefully paint this building here. I will be going over a lot of this area with darker shadows. Next, the pub. which I'm going to use a little bit of yellow ochre. I'm going to mix it with a little bit of white paint actually, just to give it more of that sort of creamy colour. Still got a bit of red on this brush. So a little bit of yellow ochre and a little bit of white paint or white gouache. And I've got these figures will be dark. And some base colour for the snow. So just take the edge off the paper, light there, just a little bit darker on that right hand side. So I'm just picking up anything that's in the palette. Just a very light grey, coolish grey, just to take the whiteness off the paper. And then continue down to the bottom, bit of cobalt blue. This is all going to be quite blue down here, but just a bit of base color just to cover the paper. Like that. So that is pretty much, that car will be a little bit darker. That's pretty much the first stage there. The next stage for me, might need to just let this dry a little bit, but the next stage for me will be adding in the snow on these rooftops, and then the darkness on these dark, shady walls here. Going over to the pub, paint around the cars, then bring in the foreground shadows and drop in the figures then into those shadows. So it's quite an important step, this. Just while I'm letting things dry, I will add in a very weak wash on that side there. A bit of burnt sienna, I think it is. It is very light on on this side of the tower. So quite light at the top, and then it goes a bit darker as we come lower down. Maybe a bit cooler as well. There. If I've gone a little bit too dark, at the top, I could pick up a paper tissue and just lift off, make sure I get a flat surface, but just lift off a little bit of the top there. If it's gone a bit too dark. All right, a little bit of snow now to some of the rooftops. I'm going to go down. I'm going to choose a smaller brush here. Just going down a size or two. This is a Da Vinci Castagno. I believe it's a part squirrel, part synthetic fibers. But again, it's a sort of mop type brush. Very good point. Very good edge to it. Just a sort of precise control I'm going to need. Still painting around a few of these different objects. Starting from the left-hand side, I'll get in let's take a look at the rooftop of the church tower again. So it is actually quite dark there. The darkness is partly hidden by the twigs of the branch of this tree, but the darkness of that snow there on that rooftop, it's almost the same value, the same darkness as the foreground shadow here, I reckon. So, and a lot darker than the sky as well. What sort of blue for this? Well, I'm going to go with a cobalt blue, see how this looks. Maybe a little bit of cobalt green, but mainly cobalt. A little bit of ultramarine blue as well. And if it's too blue, a little bit of burnt sienna. Cobalt blue. Yeah, mainly cobalt blue. So starting from this left-hand edge along the ridge of the roof, try and get a good edge here. Up to that midpoint of the side of the tower. A little bit of fairly careful painting around that sign. And then down to the top of the side wall of the church, right down to the very end of the roof. The sun being quite low, I might need to get in a little bit of shadow there against the tower, side of the tower. Now, snow on the rooftop here. Like that. A little bit of snow on a rooftop there. And over to the right. Shadow on the side of that tower there. Burnt sienna. Ultramarine blue. Bit of light red. And make sure that that side of the tower is quite dry. We don't want it bleeding into that edge. We want a nice clean edge. Try and keep to my line, and then keeping that vertical edge as straight as I can. Ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, a little bit of that light red. I can start to go a bit darker as I come down to the base. There's that little bit of a side shadow. Thinking about the angle of the sun in the winter, quite low, maybe about that sort of angle. Now, this side of the tower, it starts to widen here. And then I'm going to use a bit of neutral tint here to go a bit darker on this side of the wall. Don't need to worry about any of the windows in there. Because this side is so dark, we won't be able to see anything going on in there. And just alter the shade and the intensity of the darks and the warms and the cools in here. So maybe a little bit of ultramarine blue, a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit of neutral tint, just to get in that variety. I'm coming down now to this wall just in front of the church. And then the wall in front of the church. There's a little bit of light hitting the top on that side, but then it gets darker as it comes around. Now, coming into the middle buildings, just beyond the church, bit of shadow underneath the edge of the roof. Just need to paint some of these chimneys in a light red. Down to the top of the second car. Again, if any area needs to be just made a little bit lighter, we can use this paper tissue just to lift off a little bit of the paint. Now, this building here, this is going down the street. That needs to be a little bit darker. So, tiny bit of that yellow ochre. It's actually a little bit of blue in it. And we're coming right up to the side of the pub here. And darker down to street level. Fairly solid covering. And then a bit of light shadow on the side of the pub here. Right, the road is going to be the road. What colour would I have here? I think, again, a bit of a mixture of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. A little bit more burnt sienna, maybe. It's a sort of warmish colour to it. The surface of the road is quite damp. So ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, but maybe just a little bit more burnt sienna than ultramarine blue. And this is that left hand or the far side of the road, bit of street furniture, and then up to the main car. Second car. And then up to the gap between the two buildings. And now back towards us on this side, this road coming towards us, leaving that little slither of snow. Little slither of snow in the middle. And of course, looking out for perspective, making it a little bit wider as it comes towards us. And the edge of the road, not so neat and tidy because there's bits of snow there just encroaching on the road. There. Those cars are standing out a little bit too much now. I'm going to colour those in shortly. But just a quick reflection on what we've done so far. Might have gone a little bit too blue on that rooftop. Not so sure. Could glaze it. Could glaze over it a little bit. It's got a bit of a weak mixture of burnt sienna. There. Next, we'll just let this dry a bit because I'm now into some of the snowy shadows, but I need to let this road dry a little bit. All right, same brush. I'll just finish off. Let's go back to the source photo. I'll just finish off doing some of the rooftops here. And then cars and shadows going up to the base of that pub there. And then the foreground shadows and those two figures that I've got on the right hand side. First of all, some of these rooftops just beyond the pub. Now, a bit of dry brush here, just exposing some of the paper, will actually serve to show a bit more of that snow. It doesn't matter if I leave little bits unpainted. All right, cars. Bit of cerulean blue, bit of burnt sienna, give it a sort of greyish colour. And then the back car, similar sort of like a sort of light grey. There you are, that sort of connects them more to the background. They don't stand out too much now. Some snow across the far side of the street. We hit the cars here. Little bit of neutral tint, ultramarine blue, just to get a little bit of darkness underneath the cars. And then some shadow. Shadow going across the road. And over to the base of the pub. Oops. Mustn't go over my pillar. So shadow going across that far side, up to the pillar, and going beyond. There's a little bit of a wall in front of the pub. All right. Foreground shadow. Over the snow. And and then over the road. And now over the snow again, pick up that cobalt blue. Over the bollards. Up to the figures. We'll drop those figures into the shadows in a minute. Now, I'm not sure what's causing it, but it looks to me like there's a bit of light that's being reflected off something in the snow there. So I'll just lift off a little bit of the snow in place, just a little bit. And then these figures here, smaller brush for the figures. I'm going to go down quite a few sizes. This is a number 5 Pro Art synthetic round brush, and get in some flesh color first of all. And then keep these figures quite dark. And the other one, as I said, just a slightly different pose, different angle to the figure. Like that. Bit of shadow behind that pillar there. Do we use this same brush? No. Starting from the top. There we are. Perhaps a bit of a softer left-hand edge to that pillar. That box, bit of street furniture in the middle, will make that a good bit darker, a bit like the figures, but leave a little bit of snow on the top. And then connect with the snow. No entry sign. Actually, it's going to be in the shade, so it's not going to be bright red. I'll choose a bit of alizarin crimson, maybe a little bit of ultra blue with it, so it's not bright red. Now, if you're not so good at circles, you could, for a white circle or this white line in the middle, could use a little bit of white gouache or white paint afterwards. There we are. No entry sign. We'll probably see a little bit more of the right-hand side than the left-hand side. There. And we're now down to really the details. Are there any questions? Right, just to recap. So we've got in the main shadows. I now need to add in the details, some of the architectural details, just to give them a little bit more interest and make them look a little bit more like buildings. So windows, gutters, rooftops, these bollards, get those in as well. Let's start with the church. So small brush, not too much water on the brush, not too dark the paint. There's that thing sticking out from at the top of the tower, and then that line at the top of the tower, the window, that side, window on the other side. Okay, middle ground buildings, maybe some windows. A few horizontals, they could be shop signs and things down there. Cars will have some bumpers and things on the front. Post for the sign. Now over to the pub. And a few lines, some sort of architectural trimmings to this building. So a very fine line at the top, and then a little bit lower down, there's a thicker line. And then a few windows. And just above the ground floor, there's another sort of sign or detail. And then ground floor windows. Bollards going up the middle. Bit of burnt umber for these bollards. And they're all sorts of different colors. They go a little bit lighter. They're darker here, but they go a little bit lighter as we go up into the light. So start off with the near ones, and maybe they're kind of a little base of little covering of snow at the base of them. Next one along. Just soften up the base a bit by lifting it off. Now the ones in the middle that are a bit lighter there, to me, it looks like there's a little bit of green in them. So I'll pick up a bit of spring green. Maybe there's a bit of lichen or something on them. There. And a tiny bit of a shadow. Tiny bit of a shadow for those. just add a bit more detail to the figures. Just don't think they were quite right. Okay. Soften up that edge there. Of course, these cars are moving, so maybe there's a bit of a soft edge at the back. Next, let's have some footprints in the snow. Footprints in the snow, they go all over the place. So a little bit of a darker blue, I reckon, ultramarine blue. And just a few little marks to indicate some disturbance in the snow. Slightly lighter as we go out into the lighter area. So what I'm doing now, I'm just softening up some of the edges that are just a little bit too hard. I think they're a bit too hard where they're in the shade. Don't want any hard edges. So for example, there, where I had the rooftop joining the edge of that shadow, just soften that up a bit. Next, next we need that tree over on the left-hand side. So I think this will serve nicely just to frame that left-hand side there. I'm going to use a rigger brush for this, all right? And, well, a bit of ultramarine blue, bit of burnt sienna, and then just imagine the tree is over to the left there and sending out these random branches. You want to go a bit darker, pick up a bit of neutral tint. If you haven't got neutral tint, then Payne's Grey is a good substitute. And we're just covering the top of that roof as well. So just breaks up that edge nicely. There are some railings above the wall. Maybe Going back to my small round brush, there are some bollards here, just in the middle of the road. Now, I've got to be careful now not to overdo this. Yeah, that's all right. I've got my rigger brush, some aerials on the tops of some of these buildings here. And a bit of shadow on these chimneys. Around the windows, now the danger here is I'm adding in a bit too much detail, but I rather like some of the detail that's sort of framing around the windows of the pub. Just a few little lines in there indicate that. There's this rather nice light above the pillar. Perhaps we can have some more distant figures over there. There's a yellow sign here. That will go darker as it dries. Right, last thing for me is just add in, with a small brush, a little bit of snow on tops of some of the objects. So I'll go back to my rigger brush and some white paint. Take it out of the tube, straight out of the tube, clean brush, dampen the brush a bit, and fairly thick paint, fairly thick. Now, there could be just a little bit of snow on some of the tops of the wall of the church. There's a little bit of snow on top of the railings here. Maybe a bit on top of the wall. A little bit on top of the no entry sign. A little bit on top of that bit of the church and down that side. And then on top of the bollards, on top of the lamp. And then just maybe a little bit of light on the left-hand side of the left-hand side of the post. Tiny bit of snow. On those, bit of highlight for some of the figures, perhaps. Bit of highlight to the face and the shoulders. There we are. I think we're done on that. I think this area here looks a little bit empty. I'm not so sure. I might be tempted later on to put in a lamp post in there. There isn't one in the photo, but we've got quite a lot of pillars going on here, but just some other vertical element going into the sky. That might be quite a good idea, just to balance out the composition and fill in that empty area there. Well, I think I'm done for my demo. So thanks very much for watching. As I sometimes do, just a little summary at the end, bit of a self-critique. Our snowy street scene in Colchester. And as I said, I just added a few little vertical elements. I just thought that whole area there of the sky was just a little bit empty. So a few vertical marks there, done mainly with a rigger brush, just to connect and pierce the sky a little bit with some street lights. So one there facing right, and the other one there facing left. Just thought that added additional element to it. A few extra little bits of white as well. But there's the completed scene, snowy street scene in Colchester. Thanks for watching. Hope you liked it, and catch up with you on the next video.